Hello, we're the Lorcana twins, and we're back with a video to go over a deck I played in the biggest Lorcana tournament to date that ended up winning it all. But first, it's been a long time since our last video, so we thought we'd reintroduce ourselves.
It certainly has. Yeah, we were making a lot of content prior to the release of the first chapter, but once that came out, we decided to really dive into the game, get a lot of playing in and start collecting the physical cards. So we've enjoyed that a lot. The first big tournament we attended was in Miami, put on by PPG. At the Miami TCG convention.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and it was cool to meet a lot of the other content creators and fans of the game, and a lot of great players there, and everyone was very friendly, and the event ran really smooth. I ended up going 4-4 in the tournament, so I mean it was all right, and I was pretty happy with how I played, and I ended up playing a Sapphire Amethyst deck, so it wasn't like one of the main meta decks at the time. But it did work pretty well against Ruby Amethyst when I faced that, which was pretty prevalent at the time. But overall, he did better with a 6-2 performance, and yeah, it was a fun deck to play.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun there. Just meeting other content creators was cool. We did have to play each other in round 3, so that was
unfortunate.
Kind of, I don't know. Even when we play at locals, it seems like we get matched against each other a lot, and so we kind of one of us knocks the other down a peg every once in a while. I did get the upper hand in Miami, but the draws were just really hot for me that time. So I finished 6-2, and I thought it might be close enough to get top 16 there, but I ended up in 21st. So didn't quite make the top 16 cut. But the main thing there was just, we felt like we got good exposure to the game as well as to other community members that we've been following for a while on.
Yeah, it was a good experience, or it was a good way to get good experience at playing in person at a large tournament. And we're definitely excited about the organized play announcement that's, coming out sometime in January, we've been told by Ravensburger, to see, what they might have in store for, in-person big events in the future. But so
after that, then we continued to play with the set 1, and then we were excited to see the new cards from Rise of the Floodborn. We've enjoyed how that's kind of shifted up the meta. Although, I do think the Ruby Amethyst, like we'll see later in the deck that you played, has become really prevalent, especially like 7 of the top 8 decks from this recent tournament were playing Ruby Amethyst. So I am hoping that, set 3 can change things up, because while I really enjoy playing that deck too, I would like there to be more decks that are kind of viable to have good success with in a competitive format. Of course, when you're playing casually, you can kind of try whatever you want and just have fun with it. But, from a competitive side, you really do need to bring a good deck if you want to have a good chance to succeed. So I think that's kind of the takeaway we had from the Miami tournament. The Amethyst Sapphire was really fun, and it was kind of strong against Ruby Amethyst back then. I think I saw 4 of those in the first 8 rounds and was able to beat 3 of them. So, I mean, it had a good success rate there.
But it was definitely weak to wider boards. And
yeah, it was kind of weak to Amber Steel, which was really popular then.
But yeah, it's just, it seems like while there is, possibilities for meta diversity, I think, if a deck can't really hold its own consistently against the top decks, then it's just hard to want to play anything else. Which is why I ended up deciding for the tournament that happened this last weekend, which had 282 players, making it currently the largest Lorcana tournament to date, just to bring more of a, top meta deck. So ended up going with a Ruby Amethyst, like he said. But a little bit about this tournament. It was the 2024 New Year's tournament, and it was put on by Tia Boyson, who did a great job hosting the event, and she brought on a nice team of casters as well, and had admins working in the Discord server, keeping everything running really smoothly. And it was hosted on Pixelborn, which has been, a great asset to the community, letting people test decks and play with other people really conveniently too, if they haven't been able to access the cards, or even if they have, out of convenience, because you can't always get together with people to use your physical cards. And then also it was hosted over the Lorcana Play Network, and this was my first time doing a tournament on that platform, and I think it worked really smooth the way it was able to, help you connect to other people in a match. It'd just give you a match code after you were paired up, and you could chat to the opponent to let them know you were ready, and then you could report your results right there on the site. And so it ran really smoothly. And so we'll get into the deck list here that we can see before us that I played. we'll just go over each card and kind of its role in the deck. So starting off with the 1-drops, there's Olaf and Minnie Mouse, which have the same stats, but with this deck, I know in set 1, like Ruby Amethyst was like a really hyper control deck, and I do sometimes like that style, but I didn't end up playing much of that in set 1 just because to me that felt like that deck was usually almost always coming from behind and just trying to save off the opponent's win, and then trying to claw your way back in the end. And if you can get to that really late game and shut the opponent out, like, yeah, it can be satisfying, but I think it can also be kind of nerve-wracking and a little stressful to always be on the back foot. But with set 2, I really think this Ruby Amethyst archetype is kind of more tempo based, and I feel like you can be building a wide board and kind of questing and doing things all the way throughout the game, and then just trying to combo your way to the end with some goats and bounces and spellbooks, as we'll see later. So this deck kind of really fit my play style a lot better, and just it felt more proactive rather than reactive, so that really appealed to me. But yeah, so you've got these 7 1-drops, and you really don't want to miss your turn 1-drop if you can help it. So I would definitely always try to mulligan to at least get one of these in the hand, especially because, as you'll see, in the 2-drop slot, you have that Madam Mim Snake, who you can't really play unless you have something on the board already. So yeah, if you miss your 1-drop and your only option for a 2-drop is the Snake, then it could get off to a really slow start. And so next to the Snake, you can see Cusco, and I think that was a nice include as well. In case you do miss your 1-drop, or even if you don't miss your 1-drop, but you want to kind of build a wider board, like, he's another option to put down on 2, and even if he's taken out, he replaces himself and draws a card, and he can quest for a lore. So, all in all, I think a nice include there to make it a smoother curve.
And then moving on to the 3-drops, there are 5 different ones in this list. So we have the other popular Madam Mim being the Fox. So, when you play her, you have to pick up another one of your characters, add it back to your hand, and then she has Rush and a very nice stat line at 4/3. So that helps with some early game board clear, and sometimes even just the threat of her coming down will kind of keep your opponent from questing with what they already have down. So that can help stall it out a little bit as well. Then there's Maleficent Sorceress. She's always good for the card draw. So, just play her to draw a card. The Merlin Crab is nice because he lets you give a character +3, or challenger +3 when you play him. So this helps with certain trades, especially like in the mirror match, Minnie Mouse, the Surfer, is a very popular evasive unit with 2 lore. So if you also have a Minnie Mouse down and they quest with theirs, well, then you can play the Crab and buff your Minnie Mouse with the +3, and now they can trade with the opponent's Minnie Mouse, and yours still gets to stay on the field. So that's one good use of the Crab.
Yeah, that did happen at least once throughout the tournament. I mean, not frequently, but when it did, I know I did end up winning that game because it was just a big tempo loss for the opponent where their mini was taken off the board and then mine wasn't able to be dealt with for a long time. So I got a lot of lore out of her. So yeah, definitely surprise cards like that where you can't really necessarily see them coming are nice to include.
And another really cool thing about the Crab too is if he's already on the board and then you play a Fox after that, you can bounce the Crab and give your Fox +3. So a swinging for 7, that should take out just about anything in the game currently. There are a few things that could survive it, like an Ursula, but
yeah, that is even able to take out the 7-drop Cinderella with the resist +2. So I do think that extra damage, it did come in handy at times. And then next to the Crab, you have Fidget, which is a very nice tech card in this deck. It's definitely in there to deal with the Minnie Mouse Surfer, and that the Minnie Mouse Surfer is just such a MVP card for this deck because it can quest for 2 and it's evasive, so they can't challenge into it as much as they might want to. That Fidget, just with the 3/2 stat line and evasive, is able to take Minnie Mouse out and then stay on the board. And also, like, if you don't have one of your other 3-drops, or you don't want to, let's say, play a Fox and bounce something back, and maybe you don't have a Maleficent, or you do, but maybe you want to opt for an evasive option that can, let's say, sing friends on the other side without, threat of retaliation, or could just continue to quest every turn until the opponent deals with it in some way, because it is evasive. Like, I don't know, it's just a good, alternate option to play at that 3-drop spot, even if your opponent isn't playing Minnie Mouse. But as I'll touch on later, I did run into 7 Ruby Amethyst mirror matches in the first 9 rounds of Swiss for the tournament. So it proved to be very helpful, but I would say about half the time I played the card, the opponent was able to use something like Teeth and Ambitions to just remove it before I got value. So that felt kind of bad, but there were, about the same number of games where the opponent had a mini and I'd play it down, and then all of a sudden they felt like they couldn't quest with their mini, or they'd quest with her and then bounce her back, and that would really slow them down in terms of the lore gain. So all in all, I think it was definitely an important card to have in the deck, and you can always ink it if it didn't seem useful in a particular game.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about Ruby Amethyst now in set 2 is it's way more aggressive than set 1. Like it has the option of doing a lot of control in the later stages, but it can also, like, sometimes if your opponent isn't putting you under much pressure, you can actually put them under a lot of pressure and kind of be the aggro deck in a sense. And if they can't deal with your mini mouses, sometimes you can stack more than one on the field at the same time and just put in a lot of lore before they have a chance to really answer it. Also, another lore gain card is Merlin the Goat. So he comes in at a nice 4 cost, and whenever he leaves the field, you also gain lore. So this can put your opponent in some really tricky spots sometimes, especially in that mirror matchup. If this is on the board before the Be Prepared, you're at least getting extra lore from that. But oftentimes it's good to get it back into your hand too, so that you can continue to get 2 lore every time it hits the table. And then Merlin Rabbit, of course, is a very strong card. I would say in the mirror matchup, that's one you want to be bouncing a lot and just getting as much card draw out of it as you can.
Absolutely.
Because it's always good to have options and more cards in your hand, so you can play the right thing at the right time.
And I will say too, in the mirror matchup, I think bouncing both the Rabbit and the Goat, like, it felt really strong, especially when Ruby Amethyst currently, they can't really mess with your hand. So as long as you can get the Goat back to your hand, it's another lore you're going to gain at some time. And then a second lore, when he goes down or returns to your hand again. So, toward the end of the game, it always felt nice if you could keep bouncing him back, keeping him safe from any removal they might have, and then just repeating that turn after turn. And the Rabbit too, just to get card draw and card advantage.
I feel like he's one of my favorite cards for sure in Amethyst for
absolutely.
set 2.
And as long as you can get to that 4 ink spot, the Rabbit's uninkable, but once you get there, he draws you a card instantly, which helps you find more ink, and then you can probably bounce him back and get another option. So, amazing card there. Next is Maui, and there were only 3 copies of Maui. I think I was very satisfied with that number, especially in the mirror match. I almost never played Maui and usually just inked him. Opponents too, they really didn't get a whole lot of value out of Maui's against me either. But yeah, definitely I would say it did come in handy in the finale, in the final round against the steel deck. I know they have Hiram Flavershan, which has 6 willpower, so it could be good against that. And just also the Hades, like, it takes out the 7-drop Sapphire Hades without going down himself, and it's just a bigger body that doesn't go down to the steel damage. So I think
it's good against like Cogsworth and Tinkerbell too. Like,
absolutely.
In the Ruby Amethyst matchup, I think there's just too many cards on here that you don't necessarily want to spend a bunch of time challenging. And Maui's pretty slow if you're doing just that on your 5-cost turn, especially when maybe they've already got like Maleficent, Minnie Mouse, Merlin, or the Goat in play. And a lot of these things give you value when they're removed as well. So it just doesn't always feel as good running into something like that with the Maui.
Yep. And when you bounce things back and they replay things, like, they're not exerted anyway. So a lot of times it just seems like what you might want to hit might not even be exerted. And, when you get to 5, you're getting kind of close to the Lady Tremaine and Be Prepared territory. So you might just want to wait a couple turns and just remove things that way instead.
And next to Maui, there's Lady Tremaine. She's one of the coolest new Ruby cards, I think, from
absolutely.
set 2. The downside with her, of course, is that your opponent gets to choose which character gets banished when you play it. So, people will often try to play around that by having at least two things on the board at a time. And sometimes, they need to leave them unexerted so that you can't just trade into whatever's available and then take out their last thing with Tremaine. But, so there's times where she doesn't have the best value, but there's times where she is really great. And just it's helpful to kind of thin your opponent's board down by dropping her on turn 6 if you need to. Maybe prior to it, Be Prepared, or sometimes you're just ahead and you already have the tempo.
Yeah.
And she really helps you deal with some of their threats while still pushing 2 lore on the next turn.
I think especially if you went first, like she's really strong because you'll be able to play her down, and then they might be able to get to 6 ink as well. But you might have a wider board, and you try to have something on board besides her that you can just sacrifice instead in case they do. And like Olaf or Mini, it's always helpful. Like maybe you're at 7 ink and you could drop a Tremaine and an Olaf, maybe post Be Prepared or something. Then the opponent either has to decide they want to be prepared, your 2 characters, or just, if they had a Lady Tremaine, now they won't want to play it because you just sacrificed your Olaf. So things like that are just important to keep in mind. And then Ursula is next, and I know she's been making quite the resurgence lately. She was kind of popular for sure in the first set version of Ruby Amethyst. But yeah, now she's definitely gotten popular again. I really like the card with the 8 willpower. It's hard to take down, like with steel damage or stuff, so if you don't have direct removal. And then the fact that it takes away lore and potentially draws you a card at the same time and then can quest for 3, like, it's just an amazing card, especially in the mirror match. And it can help try to offset some of the lore gain people might get out of goats. I mean, if you're too far behind on the tempo, it's probably a little too slow for that, but at least it gives you a fighting chance. Yeah, just a very powerful card, and I guess if it ever sticks and you feel like you want to sing Be Prepared with her, that's a possibility. And then just 1 copy of Elsa, and that's the most expensive ink-costed card in this version of the deck. And I think this card came in handy a lot. I know there were a couple games where I felt like maybe I was overall ahead, but then I started to lose control of the board. But then she was able to lock down, a couple of the opponent's largest threats, and then that prevented them from being able to sing Be Prepared, and then allowed my other things to quest. And
one thing I like too here is, like, even though there's only 1 in the deck, there's so many different bounce options here where you can very easily pick her up and use her again later if you have to. And especially nice if you have, let's say, 10 ink.
Yep.
The ability to replay her immediately after questing, if you played the snake, to pick her up first.
I remember that
that did happen in one of your games. So
yeah,
there's only 1 in the deck, but you can get more utility out of her and make it feel like there's more if she survives that first turn on the board.
Yeah, that match I remember being kind of tough because I'd started to kind of lose control of the board, but then she was able to pin down a couple things 2 turns in a row because the snake bounced her back. And that was trying to kind of make the opponent have to be prepared me first, and then I'd be able to rebuild the board back instead of me having to be prepared them and then falling behind in the tempo race. So I think Elsa was very very handy when she came into play. And yeah, I mean, I would definitely consider maybe running more than just the 1 copy as well. But when you are drawing a lot of cards and it is more a later game card, like, you might be just so far ahead that you don't need it. And then there were also times like where maybe I didn't have anything on the board and I only had the 8 ink, and that kind of made me not want to just play her out in case they did have a Lady Tremaine. But if you have 9, you could combo her with like an Olaf or a Mini. So I don't know. I think overall a very powerful card, and the 3 lore definitely came in handy. And then Teeth and Ambitions, this is our first action we're touching on. It's also a song. And I think, I did face a lot of mirror matches, and I think this card in those mirror matches was usually pretty underwhelming, but there were a couple more aggressive Ruby Amethyst builds that were playing like Pinocchio and the 1-drop Maleficent that has 2 lore, and it was really good against them. And also, I guess, if you're worried that your opponent might have a Fidget and you've also got Mini in hand and you want to protect your Mini, you could always take out a Fidget or something like that with this Teeth and Ambitions. And I know in the Sapphire deck there was the Cruella, who can also attack the Mini, so this would also deal with her, or the Steel Jafar, whatever. But it was inked a lot of the time, but it was nice to have some form of direct damage, because other than this spell, you really had to kind of wait till turn 6 for Lady Tremaine to have any other removal. And her, you don't always get to pick what she's hitting. I guess you could count some of the rush cards as potential removal too, but that could be one of the weaknesses of the deck. Like, targeted removal, if they don't have exerted things, is pretty limited until you get to the Be Prepared, which just wipes it all. But yeah, this is definitely a handy card to have. I definitely was glad it was in the deck, and it was always inkable if the matchup didn't call for it.
And then after that, there is Friends on the Other Side, which is typically used in a lot of Amethyst lists just to keep your hand on the fuller side by drawing 2 cards. Always comes in handy usually, and if you do have enough card draw with Rabbit in this list, sometimes you can get away with inking the friends, but oftentimes it's just great to kind of save that and sing it with one of your 3 cost and up characters. And then Be Prepared, of course, is a great option to use if you're behind and need to kind of wipe the board and start over. And sometimes it also feels strong too, like if you're in the lead and you have so much lore in this deck with that spell book and the ability to use goats as well to get kind of free lore after the fact. Sometimes you just want to wipe the whole board if you're in a position where like you can race them from there while they try to rebuild a board after your Be Prepared. So it's very flexible, but it's nice to have something that can delete, get you out of a problem situation.
Yeah, I feel like whenever I'm thinking about it, trying to make decks viable, like it always is a question, like what do you do if you fall behind? Like does a deck have an ability to catch back up or restabilize the board? And I think Be Prepared is just definitely one of the best, if not the best, ways to do that in the game currently. So yeah, that's just a nice fallback thing if you ever do get behind. And in a lot of the games I did find that I was ahead in the lore, so it was just nice that if I ever needed this, then I could just kind of start fresh and just kind of race with the spellbooks and the goats at the end. So yeah, lastly, the spellbook itself, I think this card ended up being really crucial to a lot of the games that I did end up winning in the mirror match. It just really helped me cross the finish line. If I started to lose control of the board at the end, maybe my opponent was playing like a lot more top end cards, like more of the Maleficent Dragon, for example, or extra copies of Elsa or whatever. And then this spellbook, it's like if I was already at 15 or 16 lore, it just really put the opponent on a timer that they were just too far away from racing me to the finish with. And I know in the very last game too of the finals, I top decked this after playing a rabbit to dig further in the deck, and that got me to 18 lore, and I had a goat on board, so then it just threatens to win on the next turn, and they had no way to remove the spellbook or the goat. So, and especially in the mirror match, so like the Ruby Amethyst colors cannot currently remove the spellbook, so it'll just sit there. And once you've got a lot of ink, I mean, it's not hard to just spend one of it every turn to gain a free lore. So I thought
yeah,
it was
the only way
valuable.
they could have stopped you is if they had removed your entire board, which would have put you to 19, and then they also would have needed to destroy the spellbook. And
Right.
I don't believe Judy Hopps was in the Steel Sapphire deck that got second place, so I don't even think they had the possibility of removing of the book. So
Right. So
going forward,
it
I
came
think
in
that's
big
something
handy.
that players might consider, just if there is a way to remove items that give free lore like this, whether or not you can fit some into your list. And but yeah, I
will say
that's why it's so good against Ruby Amethyst, is right now there's just no way to get rid of a spellbook.
Yeah.
So if you're against the same thing, and you can kind of race a little faster in certain scenarios where it's nice if a board wipe happens, your spellbook is still there.
Yeah, so I think especially in the mirror matches when they didn't have any spellbooks in the deck, like it just felt really good to know like there's that extra aggressive potential. And I already feel like this game or this deck, if you're kind of if you're going first, it definitely helps to create the tempo, especially if you are curving out perfectly and not missing any of the drops. But also, I did win many games going second too, so it's definitely possible. It helps when your opponent misses their 1 and 2 drop, which did happen. And then sometimes maybe your opponent has a 3 drop. In some cases it was Maleficent, but then if I had the Minnie Mouse, I almost felt like sometimes that did happen. And then it almost felt like it switched where I was kind of the one putting down the pressure again because of her lore gain is, double that of any of the other earlier drops or drops in the deck at her same cost level. So all of a sudden, especially if they don't have a way to deal with her, that can kind of help you flip the tempo back into your favor, even if you didn't go first. So yeah, I think this deck just has a lot of potential to win in any matchup. I know there's definitely some tough ones. So I'll just say that in the Swiss round, which was day 1 of the tournament, I faced 7 Ruby Amethysts, and this deck I was able to win all of those. My toughest matchup, there was a Steel Emerald discard deck, and that I think I lost the first game in about 5 minutes. It was super quick.
Yeah, that one looked pretty rough.
Yeah, and then the second game, was not a whole lot better. It lasted a little longer, but I lost basically my entire hand. And yeah, that was that. There was no way I was coming back. But yeah, I don't know. I never really played against that deck too much. So it was cool to see it work so well, even though it was at my expense. But definitely looked kind of fun to play. So I might have to look into that later. But and then the other match I played against the Popsicle deck that was very popular at the start of set two. I'm sure it had some refinements now. It performed very strongly, and that one actually went to time. So overall, I ended 7 wins and then a tie and a loss to go into the end of the Swiss round, which I think put me into 5th at the end of that. And then we went into day 2, and there was 3 more rounds. And I guess the first round I was in another mirror match, and so that felt pretty good to know because it had went so well for me playing against Ruby Amethyst day 1. So I was able to win that. It went to 3 games, and yeah, it was close, but got it done there. And then made it to the semifinals, where it was another mirror match. So that felt pretty good as well, but it was definitely a tight, close game. And then the final round was against the only non-Ruby Amethyst deck that made the top 8, which was the Sapphire Steel. And that deck, it was pretty scary to go up against because they had been taking down a lot of Ruby Amethyst decks on their way into the final. And yeah, it looked like it was very well suited to have some counter options to what this deck was trying to do. And yeah, I mean, it was super tight, and it went to game 3. I went to game 3, and I just barely got across the finish line. I think they probably would have won on the next turn, maybe, if not the one after that, if I hadn't got it done with the book that came in clutch right at the finish. So
yes, it was a lot of fun watching my brother play in this tournament. I was kind of sick the week before this, so I did not play in this tournament, and I thought about it the night before, like whether or not I should, but I decided to just get some more sleep instead. And when I woke up, it was just getting started, so I enjoyed watching him play throughout the event. And it was a lot of fun. I'm very glad for your success. And so you might be lucky I wasn't in there. I don't know. I just no, I'm not going to take anything away from that. Well, I don't even know if I would have seen you in the tournament, and you certainly could beat me as well. So
yeah, I was really excited to win. I kind of couldn't believe it at the time, but I do feel like this deck was very very consistent, and I was able to pilot it. And there were a lot of high level games. That made it a lot of fun too, to see like there are just so many players who really seem to have a great grasp of the game and how to play it. And you could tell they were making plays to try to play around things. And I was trying to figure out like what's the best thing the opponent could do on their next turn. I know like when you see a lot of the decks were so similar that it really helped to know like, well, maybe until turn 6 you don't have to worry about much removal, besides maybe the Tremaine that comes down on 6. I know there was one match I played though where they did have a Dragonfire, and that that was pretty impactful because I wasn't expecting it so much before 6, and they were able to remove whatever they wanted. And I know in one case it was a Minnie Mouse, and might not feel great using a 5-cost card that doesn't really develop your board on a 3-drop, but definitely prevented a lot of lore gain over time. So I don't know, it definitely helps to know what your opponent might be able to do and play around that to the best of your ability. And that's what I would definitely recommend to anyone who wants to play in a big tournament. Maybe just play your deck a ton to really get a sense for the best lines of play you can take in any given moment. And also if not like trying out the other decks you think will be popular, like maybe watching some people play the other decks or trying to play against them so you know how those matchups go. But how about any other general tips that or suggestions that you might have?
I think just as the meta maybe will shift in the future, like you can just keep an eye on what's happening and see like, are there some cards you could tweak a little bit to take account of those changes. So for example, I think Steel's becoming pretty popular now, and one card in Steel that does give Ruby Amethyst a little bit of trouble is the Legendary Beast card. Just because if you don't have a direct answer for that or any direct removal, oftentimes they're going to end up drawing at least 2 or 3 additional cards before you're going to be able to be prepared, depending on what the turn order was. And sometimes those decks are also playing a whole new world, and maybe you've been sitting on a Be Prepared that you thought you were going to be able to play, and it might be gone all of a sudden, and you're not able to do that, and their board might be getting kind of wide throughout this. So cards like maybe slotting in a Dragonfire instead, maybe, and if people are all trying to play around Teeth and Ambitions, for example, and they just start playing a bunch of 3 health units, and maybe you find like, oh, I'm just always inking this, that's 3 cards in this list that could be changed for something else if people move away from 2 health units and stuff. So right now, I think the list looks really great, and it's versatile because it can handle a lot of different things. So Teeth and Ambitions is great against early game, like going wide type strategies, and so it's great there. But then also you already have a lot of good units, like the Olaf and Mini can handle any 1/1s that are questing for 2 or whatever. You've got the Rush and with the Fox, and the good stat lines on the Snake as well, and those come down early too. So Teeth is good if you really need the direct damage to happen before a trade could be made or something. But yeah, if people play around that too much, maybe you put in a Dragonfire, or just kind of see what else might be some good inclusions to answer any new threats that emerge in the meta.
And I guess I would say like the style I tried to play this with was definitely to try to maintain constant tempo and board presence, and sometimes it might look good to bounce something back, but if I wasn't being threatened by the opponent's board and I could just go wider instead, like that created more early game lore that in the mirror match is just kind of harder to come back from. And so I definitely sometimes thought developing the board wider versus bouncing things back was a good play, and sometimes too just knowing like when to quest or when to maybe sing a song or something. Like in the case of Merlin Rabbit, he's great at singing Friends on the Other Side. In certain circumstances, it's like I definitely did that a lot. But sometimes if I thought, I've got a pretty wide board, and if I had a sizable hand already, it's like each point of lore is very important, and maybe if I just get more lore now, I can always draw later if I need to. But while I've got the pressure down, maybe I should just build up as big of a lore lead as I can. So I really did try to go for that. And like for 3 drops, I mean, I almost always prioritize playing Minnie Mouse if I had her, just because of the lore and the fact that she's really safe from any challenges the opponent might do most of the time. I guess against steel decks, it might be less safe to try to go wide in case they do a AoE board wipe. And I was surprised I only ran into 1 steel amber deck in the whole event, so I kind of expected a lot more of those. Not complaining about it though, because I do think
they can be tricky if they get the right draws.
Yeah, especially with Tink plus Grab Your Swords, that can wipe out anything with 3 health or less. And I mean, most of these, if not all of these drops that cost 4 or less, only have 3 willpower at the most. So yeah, I just think it might sometimes be tempting to draw as many cards as you can, but sometimes I thought this is actually a good time to quest and build up a good lead. And then I guess just one other general thing, I know like whenever I'm playing you'll never give me a free trade, if you can help it, and I like to play the same way. So like for example, if the opponent has a Prince Eric, the 2 cost that when he attacks he hits for 3, and I just have like 1 Olaf on the board, like I wouldn't quest with that. But I know there was one time, I think in game 3 of the final, where I had either Olaf or Mini on turn 1, and then I didn't have a 2 drop, so I ended up playing another 1 drop on turn 2, and then I didn't quest with either of them because I could only quest with one of them, and he would just go down to Eric. But then on the following turn, since the opponent also missed their next drop, then they still only had the Eric, and I had 2 of the 1 drops. I just decided, well, now it probably makes sense to quest with both, because he will be able to take 1, and that feels bad, but at least the other one should survive to quest at least 1 more time in the game, and that way that those 2 characters would get 3 lore instead of just 2. If maybe I waited and he would play another character, and then they could both challenge the 1 drops at the same turn and just take them both out. So I thought there's really no benefit for me to wait on both of them. I might as well squeeze out one extra lore, and then just keep her on board maybe to, prevent against any other, or as a possible bounce target or whatever. So just little different things. It's really fun though to see how other people play. Not everyone plays the same style, and it's cool. There are so many different deck building possibilities that I'm sure will only increase with more and more sets. And so, but yeah, just as a final note, it was an amazing event. It's really cool to see like how many people were so excited to play in it, and it was really convenient how everyone could play from wherever they were located.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to try the next one because I thought it looked like so much fun.
Yeah, and absolutely. And
everyone did a great job putting it on, and it was fun listening to the streams and just kind of poking in on different games and seeing how it was going. So I enjoyed watching it.
The organizer, she organized it very well and had a great team working with her. And it was really cool. Like, I know one of the casters, Raven, I'd watched a long time because we used to play Hearthstone a lot ever since it came out, and we only kind of recently stopped once Lorcana released just to really focus on Lorcana and practice that. So I don't know, it was a really big surprise to like hear him casting one of my games. That was kind of surreal and really cool, and the rest of the casters were all amazing too, and it was just a really well run event, and so big props to them. And I definitely encourage anyone to check out their future events if you're looking for some competitive Lorcana action.
And when Ravensburger reveals what their competitive scene is going to look like, we're excited to try to be a part of that and
absolutely
to see how much fun that can bring as well.
Well, and speaking of future sets, we are going to touch on one last topic for the week, and that is a spoiler of the week. So we thought we'd pick our favorite or maybe most impactful looking spoiler that we just very recently have seen. So let's get that out here right now. It is none other than...
It's Ursula. Yes, now the Ursula from set 1 was one of my favorite artworks and effects as well. I think it's just such a interesting card that can give you some card advantage and taking away lore and just nasty things that Ursula would do. And here she's being a deceiver. She's a 2-cost inkable 1/3 Storyborn Villain Sorcerer. This is in the Emerald ink, and she has 1 lore, and the effect, you'll never even miss it. When you play this character, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a song of your choice, which is very thematic since she takes Ariel's voice. So
yeah, I love
Ariel being a great singer. This is like stealing a song from the hand. They discard it, so I think this has so many different applications.
Yeah, I think right away, I mean, even just imagine it against the deck that I just played for the tournament. I mean, if they grab a Be Prepared that you really needed to restabilize the board, that would hurt a lot. I mean, maybe you're against any steel deck that really wants their whole new world and relying on that to refill the hand.
I think this might be best against that, just because sometimes you can kind of predict when they're about to play that card, and that's a card that you only really want one whole new world in your hand at a time. Mm-hmm. So if you had one in your opening 7 cards that you kept, you're probably trying to get rid of everything else up to that and then play it when you can in a convenient moment. So if you anticipate when that's about to happen, you play this Ursula, get rid of their whole new world, now they're kind of stuck with what they've got, and it may be a very pared down hand because they've gotten rid of almost everything else. So in that case, you can maybe take control of the card advantage. And
even some other songs like the Friends on the Other Side. I mean, if they play this and just rip that out of your hand, maybe you relied on that for some card draw and you kept it in your opening mulligan, and so you're kind of you're going down a card as well, in addition to not being able to use it for whatever you had planned, and it's one less card to ink too. So
and if Sapphire ever becomes more popular, the Let It Go is a pretty good song in that ink that you could get rid of. I think against Steel Amber, like the song type deck, this obviously would have a lot of targets to choose from. So,
and not to mention all the songs that are going to be in set 3 and beyond that we don't even know about yet. So
yeah, so I really like this, and I think Emerald right now you don't see it very much in competitive lists other than the discard deck right now. But I think this just will give Emerald even more fighting power against some of the powerful songs that can really turn a game in someone's favor. So
yeah, and I know
happy to see Emerald getting what could be quite an impactful card here.
Yeah, because sometimes a lot of the Emerald cards, they seem to have worse stats and not always the highest willpower too. So, being able to steal like a grab your swords would help protect your board against that. If you're kind of going for a quick, a lot of lore but low statted characters to close out a game fast, she might help protect your characters in that way. So, and even just, early songs that the one drop Amber Cinderella might sing, she can prevent from that sort of song damage as well. So really cool card with a lot of potential.
Yeah, I'm excited to build decks with this for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a lot more cards like this in set 3, I think we're in for a pretty amazing set.
And the art is also fantastic. It's very sinister. It captures everything about Ursula that I like. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed us going over the deck list and a little bit about the tournament. Yeah, it went really well. And again, just thank you for, everyone that put it on and all the players too. They were very nice and friendly in between games, just chatting with them, and everything ran smoothly. So yes.
And going forward, we think we'll probably try to do maybe about one video a week, but it'll be flexible. But kind of, we'll just talk about various topics that we want to discuss and things that are happening in the community.
Yeah, because we're still really excited about this game, and
probably talk about set 3 as well, as more spoilers are coming, and just our general thoughts of what's been revealed so far, and we might go over some of the cards that have been shown. And
I think there's already a really great community that's excited about the game that's been built, and I think there's still a lot of people in the general public that maybe have never even heard of the game, and so as more and more people discover it, I'm sure it'll continue to grow, and our excitement continues to grow too. And it's just been great to see. So
as we sign off, I'll say fantastic job to my brother here. He did amazing winning that tournament. It was very fun to watch. So congratulations to you. And you've just, you've set the bar high. So I don't know how I'll live up to it.
I would like to see you top the next one. So,
well,
not at my expense.
I'm very doubtful, but that's just because I usually don't have too much confidence, but I know that we're both analytical. I know that we both are very, we've practiced a lot, so we have the potential to do well. But there's just so many variables in a competitive tournament. And there are everybody is great out there. So, I've no doubt it's an amazing challenge. And
at the end of the day,
you managed it here. It was amazing.
At the end of the day, it's just fun to play and compete, and that's what it's all about. And
I think it's more just the spirit of enjoying the game, because it's
just an added bonus. Yeah,
it's all about the fun for me. So
yep. Well, thank you for tuning in, and with that, we will catch you in the next one.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.